Hello, everybody, and welcome to this event about the future of graphene. It's so great to be with you. To all those in the OpenEXO community, a massive welcome. And to all those that are watching on your favorite platform, great to have you with us. Today, we have Akshay Singhal, the founder and CEO of Log9 Materials. They're a nanotech a company that specializes in leveraging graphene for commercial applications. And I'm going to bring Akshay on screen with us now, but I wanted to remind everyone that if you do have any questions, you can put those in the chat on whatever platform you are on, and we will look at those throughout the conversation we're going to be having today. So I'm going to bring Akshay up. Akshay, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kevin. All good. How are you doing?
No, fantastic. So Akshay, before we get onto graphene, could you just give a quick intro and history about yourself as well as about Log9 Materials?
No, absolutely. So, Kevin, I am a graduate from IIT Roorkee, which is one of the Indian Institute of Technologies based in the north of the country. And my background has been in material science. So I did my graduation in material science. I followed by a PhD in nanotechnology. So that's my background. And I started Log9 with two of my co-founders in 2015. Which started primarily as a graphene nanomaterials company, trying to basically develop and scale up processes for making and customizing graphene for different applications. So that's how we started. The first 2 years of the venture were based in the college incubator, which is called Tides. We were there for 2 years. Then we moved to the south part of the country in 2017, which is a city called Bangalore, and we have been operational in Bangalore for the last 4 years. So overall, in the last 6 years of our existence, I think we have moved from an R&D organization, which was primarily devoting its efforts towards producing graphene with different processes, customizing them and scaling them up. We've gone more, I would say, downstream, more downstream in the sense that now the focus of the company is to basically produce graphene for our own products and applications rather than being a supplier of graphene in general. And I think it is very important from that perspective because graphene is a very versatile material, and unless and until you are able to match the right kind of graphene variant to the application that you're targeting, it becomes a very big gap between the supplier of the material and the manufacturer of the end application. So I think that bridge is something which we realize is something is very important to kind of cover and have these two competencies built within the organization itself.
Okay, super interesting. I actually, talking about Bangalore, I was there, when was it? 2019, 2019, no, 2020, early 2020, just before the pandemic. Unfortunately, my visit got cut short by coronavirus, so I definitely have to head back to India to see so many of the amazing things there. But so if we go sort of back to the beginning, could you explain, what actually graphene is and how it was discovered and how it's sort of coming into more commercialization?
Right. So basically, I always take a tissue paper to explain what graphene really is. So what you can imagine is that this one single sheet of tissue is a single sheet of carbon atoms. So that's what basically graphene is. And when you have multiple of these sheets stacked up together, like a whole millions of these sheets, then that's when you get graphite. So graphite is basically a most naturally occurring form of carbon. But when you pull one sheet out of that graphite structure, you make graphene. Now, this is the most pristine form of graphene, which we typically, if you want to make like really pristine one single atom thick sheet of graphene, then there are very few processes to do that. One of the most commonly used ones is called CVD graphene, which wherein you deposit atom by atom and then create this sheet on a substrate. But there are challenges with kind of scaling up those kind of processes wherein you are dealing with each atom and depositing and making a sheet. Because if you really want to make a gram, it will end up costing kind of thousands of dollars before you can end up with even just 1 gram of material. So Another approach is that you take graphite and then you chisel down sheet by sheet. And that has been a more bulk way of creating graphene, which we also, and there are multiple processes to do the same thing. But we have been kind of focusing on those side of processes to make graphene, wherein you chisel down, you start with graphite and chisel it down layer by layer to kind of end up with graphene sheets. Now, in that process, you can't really get to one sheet thick. So that is the downside of the process, but that's okay, because even if you are having 2 sheets, 3 sheets, or less than 10, 20 sheets, it still has various properties which are important and which are good for your general bulk applications, like for example composites, for energy storage, batteries, for various kind of other applications, people are making cement composites, making cement stronger for your construction work and stuff like that. So there are various applications which are wider applications, and they are pretty good by doing this process. Now, when you're talking about electronic applications, for example, people talk about using graphene in quantum computing. People talk about using graphene for electronic devices, for your display panels and stuff like that. There, I think the need for more pristine single sheet kind of a graphene lies more over there in those kind of scenarios. Also, what happens is we always think that when we're talking about graphene, we're talking about this sheet, which is not the case, because graphene is more like a family of materials. So what happens is when you have single sheet, it has a different property. When you have 2 sheets, the properties are very different. When you have 3 sheets, the property are different. When you kind of crumple this into a ball, the properties change, and it's a different form of graphene. And then what happens is that if you kind of take a hole puncher and punch holes in this sheet, the holes are a different kind of graphene, and what is left behind the mesh is a different kind of graphene. So there are various ways to kind of customize and play around with graphene depending upon what application you're targeting and what kind of properties are you looking for.
Wow, so it's a whole lot more complex than people who want to simplify it, would say. But well, in a simple way, because most of the people watching probably aren't material scientists, what changes all those different sort of properties?
So one of the most
How does it have those properties?
Right. Most important thing to understand here is that when we are talking about nanoscale, and it's not just true with graphene, but any nanomaterial, what happens is bulk materials have very different properties. Because no matter, so if you consider a bulk material, right? So there will be millions and millions of atoms, right? And if you go into that material, and you basically you basically shrink yourself and go to an atom, right? And if you take a stand on that atom, no matter if you are standing on this atom versus that atom in the same bulk, your environment around you will look the same. So there's no difference, right? So bulk material is continuous. It is no different whether you are on the left side in that entire bulk, or on the right side, or on the top or the bottom, right? Unless and until you're on the surface. So surfaces are different, but in the bulk, things remain the same. Now, what happens is that when you talk about nanomaterials, these millions of atoms become like hundreds. So there are just hundreds of atoms. So the environment that each atom faces is very different, and hence properties change. Now, in the same way, when you go from a single sheet of graphene, now there's only one atom thick. So the behavior of this material will be different. Whereas when you have 2 sheets, now this atom which is on this sheet has another atom which it can look up to, and hence the material behaves differently. So that's what kind of changes properties so quickly when you are trying to add few more atoms into a nanomaterial, and in this case, few more sheets on a graphene.
Okay, wow. So is there still quite a lot of development out there happening all over the world, looking at all these different properties there?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a lot of work already. If you see, hundreds of patents and research papers are published every week on graphene, but there's lots and lots more to happen. One of the only things is that we as a world have grown very impatient. We have become impatient over the decades, so to see, because if something was developed or discovered as a new material in 1900s, or the mid of the last century, in that case, people won't mind going through the curve of the material getting developed, scaled up, and then going into applications. And it would end up taking 40, 50 years before a new material gets kind of mainstream in the market. For example, when steel was discovered for the first time, it took 50 years before it became somewhat mainstream, right? But now things actually don't happen at 50 years. They are happening in a time span of 15 years or so, 10 to 15 years, in that range. But we as human beings have gone very, very impatient. We want that something is discovered, it should get commercialized in a year, 2 years time. And I think we as scientists are also to be blamed for that to some extent, because when we discover a material, we get too excited, we open up our social medias, start bragging about it, and then people get too excited, and then there's a lot of expectation mismatch that happens. So I think that's what is kind of happening in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we always talk about within the open exec community, and I think in the greater communities that really think about exponential technologies, in that they always go through that curve of, they disrupt, but they're always deceptive before they actually disrupt, and that's the difficult thing, right? Is everybody is expecting them to be disruptive immediately, but things take time. So where would you say we are on that curve? Because obviously, when things really disrupt, it's when their price performance becomes really the game changer. Where would you think we are on that sort of curve?
Sorry. So basically, I will say that in putting it very layman terms, right? If you look at a material from its discovery to large scale commercialization, there are 3-4 steps. So what happens is, first you have the discovery of the material happening. Then you have cute applications. I call them cute applications because they really don't add much utility value, but just because that a new shining material has come in and it starts going in those applications, and it creates kind of like a foot in the door to explore applications of that material. And then it comes then the second stage comes where you try to kind of optimize the material for the right kind of utility application, basically where you're actually using the properties of that material. That's the second step. And then you have early adopters, and then you have large scale commercialization. So I think we have crossed the stage of cute applications. So you would have seen applications of graphene, like for no reason at all, people started putting it in golf balls or soles of shoes and stuff like that. And coming from the sector, I can tell you it hardly adds any value. It's just that okay, graphene is the new hype word. Let's try to put it and kind of do it, and it's important. The only importance it brings is for the long-term interest in the material. So people need to see some early applications and stuff like that, and it is important from that value chain perspective. But beyond that, it does not have much difference than what was being used earlier. So those cute applications have already happened. We have seen those last 3, 4, 5 years, and now real tech is being explored, and it is being kind of put forward. For example, in the case of batteries, in cases of structural composites, it is now going into electronic applications, EMI shielding, filtration, and whatnot. So all of these applications are coming up. There are multiple pilots happening across the world. And one of the important things that have happened is that even the traditional companies, even the older, like established companies, have developed serious interest in this material. And they have set up, they already have, like even in India, I would say, where people try to kind of lag behind in these cases a lot, especially the traditional companies, they already have established R&D centers and stuff like that as part of their group. So I think that's a positive sign. And then now in the next very few years, you will see large scale early adoption happening, and then scale up from there.
Okay, perfect. That's perfect. So I see on LinkedIn, Robin just was saying, thank you for the very simple explanation that you gave. A reminder that you can ask questions. And so when I was in the Philippines at some time last year, I actually met up with an energy company, and they were talking about graphene, and they also had an R&D division. And they were very excited, like you said, material scientists getting very excited about what the future could look like. Now, I know that your team has put together an aluminium battery. I've looked up quite a bit about it. So can you just tell us a little bit more about where you are in the stage there, and what the future looks like?
Right. So, Kevin, as I mentioned, that our focus as a company now is primarily towards utilizing graphene for energy storage technologies, whether it is aluminum fuel cell or whether it's supercapacitors and stuff like that. So, these are the two primary technologies that we are targeting. And that's the core focus of Log9 is to use graphene in supercapacitors and aluminum fuel cells. And in terms of aluminum fuel cell, one of the important things I wanted to share, as although I know this conversation is more around graphene, but I would like to touch upon a little bit on the entire EV scenario as well, the electric vehicles, which is now very core of what we do and what angle we are taking in terms of energy storage at Log9. And one thing we have to realize when you talk about electric mobility in general, that what we are doing as a world, and more so, I talk to a lot of people who are involved in this game in India. What we're trying to do is we are trying to put a square peg in every hole out there. So it's not just putting a square peg in a round hole; it's putting a square peg in round hole, square hole, triangular hole, and every kind of hole that is out there. And what we're trying to do is force fit one type of solution for every requirement that there is. Because if you look at different platforms, like say starting from two-wheelers to three-wheelers, four-wheelers, trucks, buses, and different kind of vehicular platforms, and also different use cases of these vehicles, whether the vehicle is being used for a personal use or whether the vehicle is being used for a commercial use, the requirements are very different. And hence, we need to have multiple battery technologies, multiple energy storage technologies work together. One technology going for a particular application, other technology going for another application, stuff like that. And that's when the entire ecosystem will come together and we'll see large scale EV adoption. Because if you look at it, lithium ion just doesn't work in long haul, right? So normal lithium ion technologies, if you put them for long haul, the weight becomes too much, the cost becomes too much, and the stress on the charging infrastructure becomes too much. Because if you're trying to charge a truck lithium ion battery, then you will end up requiring at least 1 megawatt of power connection, and that is huge. That is huge because in 1 megawatt of power connection, at least you can run 200 homes, if not more. So to 200 homes worth of power going into one vehicle, that's insane. So from that perspective, fuel cells make sense for long haul. And then when you talk about smaller platforms, so they require much more power coming from a small pack, and that's where we feel that supercapacitors have a very huge role to play. And also, supercaps have a role to play in conjunction with lithium ion, wherein for four-wheelers and platforms like that, by using a supercap, you can shield a lithium ion battery, and also at the same time, you can have much more regenerative braking. So in the same amount of pack, you can drive for a longer distance because now you can recapture the energy back when you're braking. So all of these things are to be kept in mind when we're thinking about a larger macro trend of EV adoption. And that's where we come in at Log9, and we have a very clear thesis that we need to look at every platform, every use case objectively, and then see what best solution we can provide out there with two of our technologies, which is on the supercap side as well as on the aluminum fuel cell side.
Perfect. Now, I'd actually like to keep this conversation going, but Robin on LinkedIn has just asked a question, so we'll cover that and then maybe come back here. And that is that he's just asking, what in your mind are the easiest and most accessible uses of graphene to drive mass adoption?
I think the first one is already happening, the first sector, although we have kind of slightly pulled back from that those use cases of graphene, which is in the composite side. So basically adding graphene for structural strength, for imparting thermal or electronic properties to non-conducting or kind of materials like polymers and stuff like that. And basically, I've seen a lot of examples wherein people are trying to put sustainably derived graphene into cement to kind of increase its strength and longevity and all of those things. So I think composites was the first lower hanging fruit, so to speak, and people have tapped into that. There are companies in Europe, graphene companies in Europe and US, which have kind of taken a lead onto the scenario, and they have already launched composite materials wherein graphene is provided as a part of plastic or part of cement and stuff like that, and they are now deriving applications around it.
Perfect, awesome. Now, I mean, when it actually comes to all nanotechnologies, I am right in saying, and this is sort of what you explained, is they actually have the properties are so different from what they are in bulk. Do you see us having sort of an explosion of this sort of nanotechnologies, around new materials happening in the coming years?
Not in the coming years. Nanomaterials are already being deployed far and wide. There are many stuff that you use on a daily basis that are already using nanomaterials, and you don't even know about it, right? So, for example, your phone in your hand has so many nano components that you can't even think about. Your display in your television, it has already has quantum dots, which are one step down of nano. So it's more than angstrom sizes and stuff like that. So there is already nanomaterials far and wide already being used in the material in our daily life and objects we touch upon in a daily basis, and it's only going to grow. It's only going to grow from there.
That's amazing. Oh, we have another comment just asking around, do you have videos that actually demonstrate some of what you're talking about? You know, I know around the aluminium battery, I've seen quite a few. I'm not so sure around the supercapacitor, and I would like to, you know, speaking about that supercapacitor, if you could give the viewers a view of how that works and what that actually is all about.
There are only few videos right now, but we are creating more content around our supercap technology and everything. And I think as we go along in a couple of months, there will be more. There will be more content available. But what I can and there is already a couple of videos out there on YouTube where I've interviewed with few people, and there are explainer videos from our side. And what we have been able to do is leveraging our expertise on supercaps. We've been able to create a battery pack which enables these 2 and 3 wheelers, particularly targeting the Indian market for now, and then slowly into the Southeast Asian market, and also we have some interest coming in from Africa, but more developing markets where these 2 and 3 wheelers are kind of actually used. Because if you look at in developed countries, these platforms are not widespread. So from that perspective, Kevin, are you there? Hello. Hello, Kevin.
Akshay?
Sorry, was it from my side or your side? I don't know.
I'm not sure, Akshay.
Okay, I'm glad we are back. So anyway, so I was saying that yeah, so basically we're targeting these intracity smaller vehicle platforms with our supercab based technology. And what we are able to do is that we are able to kind of we have been able to kind of put together these battery packs which can enable these vehicles to get charged 100% charge in less than 15 minutes time, as compared to your 4 to 5 hours of charging which these vehicles require today. So that is kind of disrupting the complete market, at least in India, where we are launching first. And also beyond just a rapid charging, we are able to provide consistent performance. There's no performance drop in terms of cross speed as a percent of charge in the battery drops down. And also the life is more than the life of the vehicle itself. So you don't see any degradation in range, because one of the big challenges in these small platforms was that when the vehicle was brought new, it was giving a range of, let's say, 70, 80 kilometers, but within a year's time, the range would drop down to 50 kilometers. And that's very, very bad, because if you have kind of planned your entire operation, like if you're using it for commercial use case and you planned your operation around a 70-kilometer range, then within a year, you're out of business, because you can no longer manage in 50 kilometers. So those are the kind of challenges that we've been able to solve, and there's been huge interest in the market. We have very large orders coming in from the Indian market to start with, and then some pilot orders flowing in from Southeast Asia, Africa, and places like that.
Wow, that's really interesting. So am I right in saying that you essentially are charging up the supercapacitor, which then charges a lithium-ion battery?
No, it doesn't work that way. But as a whole battery pack, the entire battery pack that we have been able to put together it can be charged in 15 minutes time. I'll soon there will be more information available, so I think then you will be able to understand better.
Wow, yeah, that really sounds pretty amazing, and having traveled a lot of the world, I mean, there are so many places where 2 and 3 wheel vehicles, like you say, are doing so much commercial activity around deliveries, last mile, etc. So it's actually a really good market to look at having renewable energy.
Absolutely. So that's what we are targeting. And also, the thing was, what we saw in the market was that the intent to go electric is very high for these platforms. But due to these operational challenges that I just briefly touched upon, like in terms of degrading performance in one charge cycle itself, and then degrading range over the life of the battery and the vehicle. So these kind of challenges were limiting, and also the turnaround time. So if it takes 4 or 5 hours to charge the vehicle, then the person can only do one shift of deliveries and stuff like that. So these kind of challenges were limiting the adoption so far, although the savings on a per kilometer basis are very high with electric vehicles, and the intent from an environment perspective was very high for these companies to kind of push their fleets to go electric. But now with our solution coming in the market, we are seeing super serious interest, and there's a lot of traction and kind of orders that we are getting in.
Awesome. And if we look back towards graphene, like you've said, each use case is really specific, and you've gone from supplying graphene to actually integrating it into your own products because of that specificity. Do you see that more as a future around graphene? And can you talk a bit to that?
No, absolutely. And by doing that, what we were able to do is that we were able to kind of customize the graphene at our end itself, control its properties, and match the properties to the application. So we have around 6 to 7 different processes to make graphene, and each of them kind of provide us graphene with a very different kind of set of properties. So what happens is when you're talking about the single sheet, as I was explaining, so it might have all the properties, like it has very high strength, very high conductivity, it has very high redox activity and all of those things. But you don't need all of these properties in every application. A particular application will only require a bunch of properties, like 2, 3 important properties for that application, and you don't really use the other properties that that material has to offer. But what will be beneficial is that if you are able to further enhance these 2, 3 properties which are relevant, then it becomes a very good situation for that application. And that's what we are trying to do when we say customize graphene processes, because although we might not be having the other non-relevant properties in that material that we end up with, but it has further enhanced the relevant properties for the application. And by doing that, we have been able to kind of have the largest manufacturing of graphene in the country. And that too at a scenario where we don't supply graphene as a material. We only use it for our own application.
So do you think it could look at like something like the underlying technologies that you're using is almost like graphene as a service for organizations to do it in-house? Is that something that could be done?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think companies will have to have their own innovation happening on the graphene side. Companies like us, which already have certain processes, can license out certain technologies to the relevant partners, because although we have developed 6, 7 different processes of making graphene over the years, but we are not using all of them. We are using only a few of them into our applications, but others are there as technologies which we have developed. So we can license those technologies out and then work with those companies to kind of scale up and look at applications which are relevant to those kind of processes. So that is something which we are looking at seriously right now. And second thing is that it won't matter, right? It won't matter at the end of the day for a consumer whether graphene is inside or not, because although it has been hyped as a material, but you never know. Like before graphene era or before this carbon nanotube era or stuff like that, the end consumer hardly cares about what material is inside my phone or inside the object that I'm using. All he cares about is, or he or she cares about, is the utility of the product, right? So if we are able to kind of enhance the utility of the product, whether we use graphene, whether we use any other material, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And ultimately, what you are really trying to do is to drive that adoption towards I guess more renewable, sustainable energy, but actually it's cheaper in the long run as well. So really providing people with a much better product that's cheaper, better for the environment. It sounds a little bit too good to be true, but is that about right?
So I think, Kevin, what happens is that, so I have a very big problem with the financial sector in general. What happens is that because of our good friends in the financial sector, a lot of good things never reach the market or are not able to kind of provide the right value they can, because things which only make sense for the financial sector are actually adopted in the world. And sometimes all it requires is some kind of, I would say, a soft hand from this sector to kind of make these technologies more viable. Because if you look at, for example, so when we talk about cost, right? So cost is not just the financial cost. Cost also involves the cost of health to that customer, the cost to the environment, right? Many times it happens is that there are products which are impacting the health of the customer, but the customer doesn't even know it, or that person realizes it much long after, when it's really really critical. And then at the same time, many products cause so much harm to the environment. Who will factor all of these things in? How will we attribute the right cost impact to the environment, to the health of the customer, and stuff like that? And we had an initiative a few years back, or a couple of or a decade back or so, of carbon credits and all of those things, but it was never adopted at a wider scale. And companies were not kind of pushed forward to kind of incorporate or factor in that cost to the environment in the right way. So once you kind of factor all of these things in, then a lot of new technologies are much cheaper as compared to what is traditionally available. But having said that, in our context, especially with the rapid charging battery packs that we're putting in the market, they are not just good for the environment; they are cheaper as well, because we are able to kind of provide much longer life. So you don't have battery replacements coming in the electric vehicle, and hence the same battery gives you more number of kilometers, so your overall cost is down.
Yeah, Akshay, I couldn't agree with you more when it comes to what you've just said about costs and the financial sector, and that's a whole other discussion. In fact, we had a great discussion with Jeff Booth, who's got a book which is called The Price of Tomorrow. It really is fantastic, and it speaks about how essentially the way the financial world works as sort of is a big problem. But we won't speak about that now. We'll go to a last question from the audience, from Danielle, where she's just asked, is graphene going to make applications and productions, greener for the planet? Is it a material that really is driving towards helping with our climate crisis that we have?
Well, that's a very good question. And one of the important things that graphene does is to increase life of materials. So, and I can give you multiple examples of that. So, if you look at composites, one of the key applications of graphene is to increase its strength and decrease its degradability of the material, and basically increase life of that product in use. So, from that perspective, if the same material or the same product can be used for a longer time, you're essentially reducing the impact on the environment, because you don't need to create a new component, the same component, another piece. So what happens is that instead of using two or more pieces for the same kind of a duration, now one piece is good enough. So you're using less material, so it is more sustainable. And it is happening across the value chain, or across the sectors. For example, in composites, in batteries, addition of graphene increases the life of the batteries. That is happening. And there's a friend of mine here in Bangalore itself, who's working towards developing very new age advanced materials for space flights. And he works in the same sector of carbon nanotubes, graphene, carbon materials, and stuff like that. So using these kind of materials, he has been able to create a nose cone material for the space flights and re-entry into the atmosphere and stuff, which has tremendously increased the lifetime of the product, as well as reduced the overall weight of that material. So lesser amount of weight, or lesser amount of raw material going into making it, lesser amount of energy required to make it, and with a longer life. So these kind of things impact or basically increase the sustainability of what we're trying to use and put forward in the market.
Awesome, Akshay. Well, it's been fantastic chatting to you, getting some insights into graphene, as well as what you were doing there out of Bangalore for the world. So just last words that you want to share with folks as we end off today.
I think the only thing which I'll leave behind is that it doesn't matter what material goes inside. All we need to do is make sure that we use new discoveries on a sustainable path, unlike people before us. So I think most important is to look at sustainable applications of new discoveries that we are doing, rather than having a purely capitalistic view about things.
Absolutely, Akshay. Thank you so much for being with us. Hopefully when I'm next in Bangalore, I can pop around and actually see what you're doing there. Really appreciate it, and have a fantastic evening your side.
Thank you, Kevin. Look forward to meeting you in person. Yeah.
Perfect. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
So that was Akshay from Log9 Materials. We're going to be having a few more of these future of type discussions. Our next one is actually next week around solar, speaking to Fabrice Testa and their company, which is turning sand into solar panels. So if that interests you, do join us. I also want to do a shout out for 2 more events happening today. A bit later today, we'll be speaking with Francisco Milagres, who is a long-time OpenExo community member. And then today, the Exos token turns 3 years old. So please do join us at our birthday party, which is happening a bit later today. If you go to link.exos.2/3, you can find the details for that. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again soon.